بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he says, the believer views his sin like a mountain above his head that could crush him at any time. The munafiq views his sin like a fly that lands on him and he just waves it away. So imagine the hal of Sahaba radiallahu anhum, right? The piety that they carried. It was powerful. It's really powerful and really deep. And their fear of Allah Ta'ala, their awareness of their sins, that's another thing, right? Because we're oftentimes oblivious to our sins. We don't even know we're sinning. Majority of the time we're sinning. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, it is enough for a man, enough of a sin, I guess I'm trying to figure out the translation, كَفَى بِالْمَرْءِ إِثْمًا. It is sufficient of a sin for a man to look down upon his brother. To look down upon his brother. That is sufficient of a sin. So you just think about it. How many moments have passed by and we judge others in some way? Because forever with their appearance, the way they talk, the way they did. Something about them just kind of rubbed us the wrong way. And we just like, okay, this person is, one of those people or something of that. The thought comes by. We just look down at them. The thought that is... So that needs clarification, right? Is the thought a sin? Impulses are not sins. Impulses, right? Human hawa that occur are not sins. Conscious opinions of people are sins.
That you don't even disclose.
That you didn't even disclose. Because this is a conscious thought. This is an intentional. This is something that a person has, a perception that they've developed in their mind about others. It isn't an impulse, because an impulse is like they desire their lust or greed, right? But then they refrain. This is a natural impulse, right? There's a natural impulse. There's no sin there. But conscious thoughts are. Because the hadith says, none of you truly believes until his desire is according to what I have brought. And so here the desire, what is the desire being referred to? It isn't our natural desire. It isn't our natural impulses of lust, greed, anger, so on and so forth. Because these things it's who we are. It's part of our makeup. You can't erase that. You can't change that. But the desire like, if this wasn't haram, I would do this. Then that shows we still have a preference for something. Like we have a conscious preference for something haram, but we don't do it because Islam made it haram. So our conscious will is still not in alignment with the command of the Prophet ﷺ. Does that make sense? So the impulse is kind of innate human behavior. What is different is not this innate human behavior. It's conscious qualities we've developed because of sinful acts. Like we've become judgmental of people. We judge things based on value, tribe, nationality, lineage, appearance, looks, skin color, whatever affiliation they might have. We've been conditioned. And so now when we look at a certain person, yeah, we become biased, but that takes conditioning, right? It isn't something, right? It takes conditioning. Everybody does, right? Right. So it does. And so we're not just talking about bias here. So the reality is the believer has to purify that bias. It's not allowed, right? We're supposed to purify. You can't be biased. Whatever is jahiliyyah, you have to remove that, right? So, and so if it's just a thought that occurred at a moment and a person says, astaghfirullah, that's one thing. And so because they're countering it, they're trying to work to get rid of it. But if it's an opinion they have, a perception, they view people, they judge people based on their looks, based on their certain qualities, then that person is allowing that bias, that stereotype of people to remain. Does that?
Yeah, I think
It's a very subtle difference, right?
even the religion also has bias too, because the religion says excuse them, forgive them, think positive about your brother.
Absolutely.
Technically, even the deen has bias. I understand that.
Well, the wording, when you use the wording bias, it's
Bias isn't a bad thing.
right. No, but when you say the term bias, I think the deen commands noble character.
Yes.
Right.
It
So I would, right.
It is a direction.
No, but the wording bias, I don't.
It has become a negative connotation in modern times.
Right, and so that's why I would choose a term that doesn't have that negative connotation, I guess.
But that is again.
But I understand if we talk like objectively, linguistically.
That we are now demonstrating our bias to the word of ba. You know what I mean? Like this is a very circular thing,
Okay.
which happens, which is fine. It's not a big deal. I understand having steering your thing for a believer towards the positive, always thinking of the positive. My question more was like, you meet somebody, you know them, and based on how they act, you're like, this is not good, right? Like, you're definitely acting a certain way that isn't the best way, and you have evidence based on the person's behavior.
No.
So that's forbidden too.
No. So there's two things, right? So I think maybe there's the brother's question for those who are, listening online, is you have an obvious, right, flaw, bad character from an individual, and you hold them accountable to that.
Right.
That's fine.
Okay.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about judgment of people.
Like first glance.
First glance, like, those people, right? There's this superiority, inferiority kind of perception of people. That's the sin.
Yep.
That's the sin. And the thing, I guess my attention I was trying to bring is, these sins happen so subtly, and we don't recognize them, right? And so, another example is the Prophet ﷺ, he said, a man might speak a word from the wrath of Allah, and he ends up in the hellfire because of it. How many times have we done things that are verbally that maybe we never thought about? Maybe when we were a young man, woman, we really said some hurtful words to someone. Maybe even shouted at our parent. And that moment, we earned the decree of Allah's wrath. And we never sincerely repented. And we never rectified our state. We don't. So these moments could have passed by any one of us and we just never thought about it. But because of that one moment, Allah's decree was passed and matters were decreed and punishments were passed and we never were aware until it's too late the day of Qiyamah. Na'udhu billah min dhalik. Right? So that's like the fear, right? You can't be secure. That's what Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, Anas bin Malik, they're trying to teach the younger generation, like, there isn't a sense of security, right? This was a unique quality that distinguished Sahaba from all future generations. Their awareness of Allah Ta'ala and their awareness of their sin, their impulses, their weaknesses, their complacency, their forgetfulness. You get tired after a while. You get tired. You're just like, I just want to, I don't want to be so conscious of myself. And just let go. Right? That's why a lot of people, they don't practice Islam, or Ramadan is like, okay, I'm hard after Ramadan. And it takes discipline. It takes discipline. It takes development. You as human beings are very forgetful, very emotional, right? All these mistakes happen. And so we want to develop that kind of awareness, right? Not, having that fear. Now, I don't want this to be exaggerated to the point that it leads to hopelessness, because that's not my message. But right now, that's, because, subhanAllah, on the opposite end, Allah Ta'ala, He says that the only people that lose hope in Allah are disbelievers. And the people who are secure of Allah's punishment are sinners. So even like losing hope is a greater sin. It's an act of disbelief. Compared to not fearing Allah, that's a sinful state. So like losing hope is a greater crime than feeling like overly secure with Allah Ta'ala.